Good evening, everybody. Welcome inside the Villanova Basketball Report. It is live here from our Bluebell studios. Bob Long, Kevin McClernand is live in Baltimore alongside. No Kevin Long here tonight. We will hear from him later on in the show, but excited to be alongside everybody for what is another great week of Villanova basketball, a team that is still unbeaten in Big East play. Kind of amazing when you think about how things started for this team. Obviously, the losses to Furman, Michigan was embarrassing, and now the Cats starting to identify their ways. We're going to talk about the ways that they've changed the ways that they've changed playing. Frankly, their offensive scheme has tremendously adjusted. I think it's been a lot of the right moves being switched. And then we've seen some players that weren't really part of that big three earlier in the year as guys that are key contributors right now. As I mentioned, Kevin McClernand is with us in Baltimore. Kevin, welcome. And what are your thoughts on the Cats as they win 2 more games last week at DePaul and then at home against Georgetown and await possibly their biggest week of the season thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been on in a while, and they've won 10 straight games, so maybe I should jump off right now. I don't know. But, yeah, it's a great way. What are they, 9-0 in conference right now? So, I mean, couldn't ask for any more than that, especially, like you said, after the ugly start to the season.
Well, it was an ugly start to the season, but what you see right now is a team that's finding different ways to win. A game in which Phil Booth, your most proficient player over the last month and a half and really over the whole season, has been the guy that you count on in big moments. He has struggled. He struggled early in that game. Finished 5 for 15, 2 for 8 from beyond the three-point line, but it wasn't until late in that game that you got a really big three-point shot from Phil Booth, put Villanova up 5 points from what was 55-53 to 58-55, coerced a timeout out of Patrick Ewing and the Hoyas, and from there, Villanova didn't look back. It was tied at 53 just slightly earlier in the game, and it was one of those games where you got the sense that one team needed to come out and start executing down the stretch. It was Villanova that did that. It was one of those uncertain questions, though, as I mentioned. And Kevin, my thought for you, question for you is, this is a team that's kind of changed its mantra, has figured out how to win games late. You think back to Furman, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the Providence game very early on in Big East play. Now we're 9 games in. The way this team finishes games feels different to me now than it was earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, especially Georgetown, they were able to close it out. I mean, they were able to close out Providence earlier in the year, but, I mean, they did it in the most ugly way possible. And they just need – I know Phil Booth goes into hero mode sometimes, and he's been cutting that down lately. And, I mean, he makes some of those shots, but they're not always going to go in. And in games like Providence, the teams are going to catch up if you keep taking bad shots.
Well, we talked a lot about it a few shows ago, Kevin. The fact that Phil Booth, the way Jay has engineered this offense, I think to you, to me, to a man, Jay would say this isn't his most efficient basketball team that he's ever had. But that was never going to be the case with the guys that you lost. Really, in theory, every one of those guys could have come back for another year. But those 4 guys have gone to the NBA, and now it's a different basketball team. Phil Booth, I think, is the most efficient option for this team. You call it hero ball. I don't necessarily disagree. But what the decision, I think, told us when they made the decision to take Collin Gillespie off the basketball, really let Phil Booth run the point and let Collin Gillespie filter into a spot-up shooter type role with the ability to also get guys into the air and draw fouls or get to the basket via drive. But again, starting in possession off the ball and the offense not running through him, I think told Phil Booth that we need you to be the guy. And we need you as Phil Booth, the leader of this basketball team, to be the one taking the shots late in the shot clock and the guy that even if it is a not a high percentage look, he needs to take more shots than anybody else on the team because Sadiq Bey is not creating his own shot. Damier Cosby-Roundtree is not creating his own shot. And Jermaine Samuels is not creating his own shot, which we're going to talk about shortly here as well. So the hero ball comment I get, but I also think it was a discussion with Jay, Phil, the other coaches to say, sometimes that's going to be what Villanova needs. And Phil Booth taking 15 field goal attempts on average per game the last 2 months is exactly the type of basketball that I think they want to play.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned earlier in the year how this team, it's going to take a while for them to figure out what kind of team they are. We saw Jay test a lot of things out. Pascal and the other bigs bringing the ball up in probably like a 3 or 4 game span. Booth and Gillespie both playing off the ball. So he really tested things out, and it seems like obviously he found the best way for this team to be efficient.
You know, we talked about this, specifically Collin Gillespie, really early. The first game that this occurred was St. John's, and Phil Booth took a lot of really difficult shots and made a lot of difficult shots. And then that kind of continued, and he filtered more into that role. Not to say we were on it, but we were on it really early, and now the flavor of the day is the recognition by the folks that are watching Villanova, covering Villanova, that this is what's happening. But Kevin, we were on it early, and I do think that it's something that's going to continue over the course of the year. The other thing we're going to talk about, especially in the V's and O's here today, is that when they play at the Wells Fargo Center, and you see this across the country, people might think it's a misnomer. People might think it's in your mind. Some people might think that there's really something to this. I'm of the belief that there is something to this. Collin Gillespie has NBA range, which is tremendous. Joe Cremo might not be confident enough at this point. When they play at the Wells Fargo Center and they space the floor the way they do, even though you know that the college three-point line is inside the NBA three-point line, it's just natural. You've been playing along the furthest line your entire career, and it's just natural that Villanova spaces the offense even more when they play at the Wells Fargo Center with the Sixers NBA three-point line sitting there. And Collin Gillespie takes more NBA range three-point shots at the Wells Fargo Center than he does at Villanova. 2 ways to think about it. Bigger driving lanes, the floor is more space, but the other thing is the further away from the college line you get, the lower percentage your three-point look is. Fortunately for Gillespie, he's been dynamite from very, very deep.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you would assume that there would be some adjustment. Just, I mean, like you said, psychologically, you know that's the last line, but, I mean, still a good amount of distance. And he's obviously adding enough and perfectly enough onto those three-pointers when playing at the Wells Fargo that they're going in. And, I mean, it's really impressive that he's shooting so highly that far away.
This is the Villanova Basketball Report. It's live here on BLS with Bob Long, Kevin McClernand via Skype in Baltimore. We're going to have Kevin Long on with us in about a half an hour. He's going to give his thoughts on what he saw last weekend against Georgetown and preview the next week's game against Marquette. That's something we're going to get to in just a few minutes. Villanova versus Marquette. The Cats number 14, the Golden Eagles number 10. And really, Woj doing a great job up there in Milwaukee. We'll talk a lot in depth about the Golden Eagles, and that'll be a big portion of the whiteboard discussion tonight as well, how Marquette is going to pick and roll and high screen Villanova to death, and how Villanova is going to need to adjust defensively, so stay tuned with us for that. But first, we talked about Gillespie. We talked about Phil Booth. Those roles are very well documented in the way they've changed in the last month. The guy that I think is now starting to catch the eye of a lot of Villanova basketball fans and people that follow college basketball is the changing role of Jermaine Samuels, and not in the affirmative. Now, Jermaine Samuels had 16 rebounds, his career high, his game high, his season high, obviously, and he was an absolute monster on the boards. It actually gives some credence, perhaps, to, or at least another anecdote, onto what Derek Gerberich said when he was on with us 2 weeks ago from Stathouse Analytics, when he said, listen, the 5 guys that rebound the basketball the best, that lineup has Jermaine Samuels in it. So does the second iteration of that of that best 5. So does the third. It's only the fourth when Demir Cosby-Roundtree gets into that 5-man efficiency lineup from a rebounding perspective. Didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. Jermaine Samuels is a guy who collects about as many rebounds per minute as Cosby-Roundtree does over that portion of the season. And Cosby-Roundtree gets more rebounds per game because he plays more minutes than Samuels. So where's that come from? Oh, by the way, I think Cosby-Roundtree happens to be the best rebounder on the team. Well, Jermaine Samuels stepped up on Sunday and had the rebounding game of his career. He's been absolutely fantastic on the glass recently, And good for him. I mean, he's finding ways to contribute when he's not scoring. And why is he not scoring? I don't know. But for me to speculate here, which you're not really supposed to do, but because I haven't heard anybody on Villanova's press row ask the question, Jay, why is Jermaine Samuels not catching to shoot the ball anymore? He did it a lot earlier in the season, sometimes ill-advised shots. But why is he not catching the ball to shoot? He's not even looking up at the rim, which goes against what Villanova teaches. Shoot him up, sleep in the streets, catch to shoot. Jermaine is just immediately bounce passing the ball somewhere else. So the two theories I have. One, a simple red light. You see it at every level of basketball. A big man gets 15, 20 feet away. You cannot shoot this baseline long two. Or on a high ball screen, if you pick and pop at the top of the key, you cannot shoot this shot. Is that what's going on with Jermaine Samuels? I'm not sure I understand why. The other thing is there an injury of some kind? Shoulder. Some other issue that we don't know about. That Jermaine is not able to shoot outside shots. In fact, before we go back to Kevin here, let's take a look at what we've seen recently from Jermaine Samuels. These are his stats in the last 6 basketball games. Against Creighton, 4 for 7, 0 for 1 from beyond the arc. Xavier, 3 for 4, 1 for 1. Prior to that, he was averaging 2 to 2.5 threes per game. So then you look at Butler, Seton Hall, DePaul, and Georgetown. He's taking a combined 5 shots in those 4 basketball games. And the one against Seton Hall was a layup where he was pretty much underneath the hoop and there was nothing to do but go up. He's also had passes in the lane where he could have gone right up and passes it back outside. Jermaine Samuels, it's more of an eye test thing even than a statistics thing, but these also show you his season statistics and average field goals per game, average three-point shots per game in the last 4 games at Butler on January 22nd to start has been woefully down, and the eye test tells you even more. Let's go to Kevin on this one. Have you noticed anything with Jermaine Samuels in terms of his changed role and, frankly, whether it's a fear or an understanding that he's not supposed to shoot? There's been a significant difference that I've seen.
So obviously, I mean, I have noticed the lower amount of shots that he's been taking, and I wouldn't go all the way to saying he has the red light. Maybe just Jay telling him be smarter with them, and maybe Jay pulling him out of the game if he thinks he takes some bad shots. But yeah, like you said, 13 points at Creighton, and in the next 6 games, I believe 18 total points. So I mean, we'll see this week whether they try to utilize him against Creighton, since he was successful in their first matchup with 13 points.
So are you telling me that if you, and I'm definitely taking words out of context, but if you don't think there's a red light and you don't think there's an injury, do you think that my ask of folks in the Villanova media that are either meeting with Jay after these basketball games or once per week, that these folks shouldn't have either the foresight or feel the need to ask Jay if something has changed with Jermaine Samuels? And I'll say this. If I missed something that somebody asked that question, I apologize, but I haven't seen anything out there about it.
No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, it's definitely noticeable. I mean, you don't even have to watch the games to notice. Just look at the box score and see the numbers all the way down in field goal attempts. So somebody, and like you said, maybe we missed it, but somebody should have definitely asked Jay the question by now.
Bob Long, Kevin McClernand here on the Villanova Basketball Report. It is live every Monday night. We're going from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. We discuss what has been the big topic in Villanova basketball. We preview what comes next. We do our whiteboard discussion, which is a great part of every show. And then, of course, we have some trivia for the fans at the tail end, as well as some pick'em. So, Kevin, anything else that you wanted to chat about from this past week? A win against DePaul, a win against Georgetown, big win against the rival. Patrick Ewing brings the squad to town. Max McClung, pretty solid in his performance, but I would call him streaky in that loss to Villanova. Made some dazzling shots. Great use of the English off the glass and a really good finisher. But this Georgetown program, what, second year under, or is this still just, this is the second year under Ewing, is it not?
Yeah, just a second.
Yep. So, I mean, where do you see this program going? Where do they fit into the Big East? And the Big East in general. I mean, they have a 9-0 Villanova team, an 8-1 Marquette team, and then the next best team is 4-5. Looks like a two-bid league to me. Obviously, those two teams are in the top 15 in the country and have a marquee matchup. But where is Georgetown? Where is the Big East?
I think Georgetown's definitely on the way up. I mean, bringing in a guy like Ewing, knowing the player and his coaching experience so far, I mean, he's spent a lot of years as an assistant coach in the NBA. So I think he's definitely going to bring this program back, maybe not all the way to what it was in the 80s, but back to what we're used to seeing them. And, I mean, as you said, a two-bid team, Big East, that's definitely down. Maybe another team could win the Big East tournament or get hot late, but only getting two teams in is really low for this conference.
It's tough because everybody's beating each other up, and there might have been a team that a lot of people could have seen making that jump this year. St. John's, undefeated through, all but their last game of the non-conference play. And now they're 4-5, I believe, as well in the Big East. So the problem there is, unless they're going to go beat Marquette or beat Villanova, where are the opportunities for the resume-building wins for the Red Storm, for Creighton, for Xavier, all those Xaviers in the last place in the conference right now? I mean, when we take a look at the standings up here on the big screen right now, Xavier at 3-7. St. John's, as I mentioned, 4-5. They were 12-1 in the non-league, and there they are. I mean, you have 8 basketball teams that are under 500. St. John's 4-5. Georgetown now 4-5. Creighton 4-5. They come to Villanova on Wednesday. We can talk a little bit about that game. Seton Hall 4-6, and they came out and just rolled over against Villanova. DePaul at 4-6. Butler at 4-6. Providence 3-6. So, Kevin, back to you here. I mean, the league itself, Villanova, Marquette, I don't see a way, unfortunately, with some of those overall records to go along with under 500 Big East records, that unless a team rips off their next 7 of 8, 8 of 9 Big East basketball games, that anybody has a shot to get in.
I think the team that I would bet on, if I had to bet one, would be St. John's. Obviously, you mentioned a hot start for them and all the talent they have. So, I mean, Pons is a player that if he gets hot, that team can roll. And, I mean, maybe, like you said, get a quality win in the Big East tournament against one or both of those teams.
Yeah, I think you're right. The really built-in struggle with St. John's is that they scheduled a non-league schedule that made Georgetown's non-league last year look like a clash of titans. I tell you what. I mean, it was a brutal non-league schedule, so there's nothing even remotely close to a quality win within that non-league schedule for St. John's. So great that you won 12 games, but you had to prove it in the Big East. Not doing that, at least not yet. But you're right. They're a team that could rip off 6 or 7, and now that discussion changes. Before we move on to discuss Marquette as well as the upcoming game against Creighton, any thoughts on where we are at this point, where the Cats are, thoughts on last week, thoughts on the formula, how the team plays?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really argue with undefeated conference record right now, 10 in a row total. I mean, they're looking at a decent seed if they can finish this season off as they should. I'm going to guess they don't finish the season off undefeated in conference, but 1 or 2 losses, and that's a great conference league right there.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose just 2 more games the rest of the way, if that's what we're going with, sure. They're a 3 seed, maybe a 2 seed at that point. I mean, they're 14 now. So that would mean that you're going 7-2, let's just say the rest of the regular season, maybe win the Big East tournament. You end the season with just those 6 losses, 4 of which came in non-league play. And I do think that you're looking at a strong 3, back-end 2 seed for Villanova, which would be certainly a wonderful resurgence from where they came. 2 foes standing in the way this week. Creighton at home. Really good team. Crumple was very difficult for Villanova to handle when they went out to Omaha, Nebraska. Kyrie Thomas, very solid player as well. Pretty good basketball team. Loves to light it up. Defense has struggled this year, Kevin. This is going to be a great matchup in the Pavilion. And Creighton's a team that, with those soft rims that we know they have at the Finn, from the old school Pavilion as well, good shooting lines. It could be a slugfest in the Pavilion, but what I see as a little bit of a more likely outcome is a shootout. And I think it's going to be, can Collin Gillespie continue the hot shooting that he's exuded the last 2 weekends at the Wells Fargo Center? Can Phil Booth create his own shot? I think they're going to create some interesting man-to-man matchups on the Creighton side to try to slow up Phil Booth, because Booth was absolutely amazing at Creighton last time they played. Pascal is clearly a matchup problem, but Crumple on the other end. Who's going to guard Crumple? You don't want to put Pascal on him. One, because he does outsize Pascal by so much, and two, because Eric Pascal, you need to give him a buffer for 1 or 2 offensive fouls in a given game because of the aggressive style by which he plays. So whether that's Sadiq Bey again, or whether Demir Cosby-Roundtree, who wasn't trusted at the time to go guard Crumple when they were out in Omaha. I think he was in a bit of the doghouse. Will that change it all? And will Cosby-Roundtree be a defensive difference maker on Wednesday night?
And we've talked about it all year. The lack of depth and the foul trouble that those big guys have gotten in. I think Cosby-Roundtree ended up fouling out of the game yesterday. So,
right.
These guys have to be careful. Pascal has to be able to stay in the game. They're going to need him in the game for as long as he can play. So stay out of foul trouble. McDermott's a very good coach. I've always liked him. So I think he's going to come up with a plan, like you said, to try to slow down Booth, and we'll see how he can handle that.
Yeah, Kevin, I mentioned as well when we had the Big East standings up. There they are again. Creighton at 4-5, 13-9 in the for their overall record. This is a team that I don't know is going to be able to go to the NCAA tournament. But remember, this is a team that also scheduled itself out of the league in a very difficult fashion. They played Gonzaga, and they have had some games over the course of the non-league. Not enough of them came up in W's, but that did challenge a team. This is another team that I think is capable of ripping off 5-6 games in a row. In fact, I would argue that this is the 3rd or 4th most talented team in the Big East. So you're going to play, let's just call them the 3rd most talented team in the Big East on Wednesday, and then hold your applause till the end here. I think you're going to play the most talented team in the Big East, bar none, on Saturday at Marquette. So it is a challenging week. Want to get your thoughts on Creighton first, but then whether you agree that Marquette is the most talented team in the Big East, and then we can talk a little bit about that matchup.
Yeah, I'd probably have Creighton at the 4th most talented, but they're still right up there. They're coming a long way. You got to remember, it's a long travel for them to come all the way from Nebraska. So I think it's going to be a close one. Like you said, probably going to be a barn burner. But I think Nova does come out with it. Going to need a lot of – the bench is going to have to help. Cremo is going to have to hit some shots. I think Cosby-Roundtree had 6 points yesterday, and that was their only bench points. So those guys are going to have to step up and make some defensive stops at the end of the game if they're going to want to win.
Bob Long, Kevin McClernand here on the Villanova Basketball Report, previewing now the Marquette basketball game. And honestly, I think what you were getting at was a good take about Creighton being the 4th most talented team, and whether Marquette is number 1 or not maybe comes down to whether St. John's or Villanova are the number 2 most talented team. But again, doesn't really matter, doesn't affect the standings, and doesn't affect whether you win or lose a basketball game as much as some of the other factors. But Johnny's as talented as anybody in the Big East as well. That's a good take. Marquette, though, coming up on Saturday. First of 2 games between these 2 programs. Remember, the Big East, 10 programs, 9 opponents, 18 Big East games, a true round-robin home and away format. This game at the Fiserv Forum, the old BMO Harris Bradley Center, is going to be a lot of fun. Marquette, Kevin, 14-0 at the Bradley Center, Fiserv Forum. And there's one other thing that I think you would appreciate, and that's that they took a little bit of a page out of the book of the Philadelphia 76ers. That's right. Let me make sure I get this right. It's the Shake Shack free throw freeze. Boy, that might sound familiar to some Philadelphia Sixers fans. The Shake Shack free throw freeze. If an opponent misses a free throw in the second half, you get the thunderclappers out. You make some noise, because if that player misses, or anybody on the opposing team misses 2 consecutive free throws, it's free Shake Shack for everybody in the building. Now, I'll say this, Kev. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, and I think the folks at the Philadelphia 76ers organization might have a copyright claim.
Yeah, I mean, it really gets the crowd going. So, especially when you see that first free throw missed, everybody in the arena gets into it. So, it'll be tough making those free throws down the stretch.
I like how you're kind of the straight man here, and I'm making some joke about the free throw freeze, and then you go in and actually break down how that affects the team. So I can appreciate that, but unacceptable to steal the Wendy's. Completely unacceptable. Although Shake Shack is superior to Wendy's, come at me.
I'm good. I'll stay over here.
All right. I don't know if they do that down there in Baltimore, but
there's no basketball team down there. No NBA team, at least.
Well, fair enough. Is there Shake Shack?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, well, you got to find that out. Big wins at home for Marquette. They took down University of Buffalo, who, unfortunately, tough loss to Bowling Green recently, so they are in free fall. But at the time, Buffalo, I believe, was number 14 in the country. It was a big win for Marquette, who was in the 20s at the time. Convincing. Buffalo certainly hung, but what was convincing to me is that this Marquette team is very solid and that Buffalo is very solid. Wisconsin, kind of a reinvigoration of that program. At the time, they weren't playing quite as well, but Marquette able to beat Wisconsin, a very solid team. As I mentioned, 14-0 at home. This is a fan base that's really gotten behind this program, and they don't have a lot else at this time of the year. Packers are done. Of course, the Bucks are playing some pretty good basketball as well, but Marquette has been, in many ways, a real beacon of that community for a long time. People love the Golden Eagles, and I believe that kind of like when you go up to Providence, Rhode Island, that this is going to be a really tough place for Villanova to play on Saturday, not to mention that you have a team full of positionless type guys. Everybody can shoot the three, except for some of the bigs, but 3 or 4 guys on the floor at any time that can shoot the three. They're going to run a ton of high ball screen, and I think it's going to be a big challenge. Also facing, amongst all that said, the best player in the Big East in Markus Howard.
Yeah, I think Saddiq Bey is going to be the key in this game for them in order to stay in it. Like you said, I think Marquette's more talented than Villanova, and picking up those screens and moving along with defensively is going to be key for the team.
I'm not sure who's going to guard Theo John. Theo John at 6'9", a guy, he's not going to pick and pop you. He actually hasn't taken a three-point shot all year long. But what he can do is lay a big screen and let Markus Howard come off that screen. What is Villanova going to do? Are they going to be quick to switch? If that's the case, I think that you sit Demir Cosby-Roundtree down on the bench for the vast majority of that game. Are you going to ask Villanova to try to hedge and recover? In which case, Cosby-Roundtree is your guy to do that, and then you allow Phil Booth or Collin Gillespie or whomever will be guarding Markus Howard to try to recover, and then backside help as Theo John cuts to the hole. But Villanova has had trouble, Kevin, we've talked about this for years, trouble guarding the high ball screen for as long as we can remember. And this goes back to them winning national championships. But when you have the defensive setup that Villanova has, where they go almost exclusively man-to-man defense, which has changed slightly this year compared to past years, and you have bigs that, to this point, Ochefu was a great player, Cosby-Roundtree a great player. They weren't guys that were used to defending on the perimeter. Spellman, to some extent, was, but he got lost when it comes to communication and switching. So the bigs that they've had, have not really been able to guard the high ball screen as well as I think Jay would have liked. So this, take advantage of, talk about how great this Marquette team is, and a style of offense that Villanova has struggled with defensively. That's why I think Saturday's a big struggle.
And Marquette, like you said, all those 5 guys can switch, play any position. And, I mean, they're a perfect example of what basketball is becoming right now. And, I mean, Roundtree is going to struggle. If they're going to switch, they really can't switch, like you said.
Unless he sits down, unless he plays, 10 to 12 minutes max, because then maybe you ask Samuels to body up against John inside, try to have another great rebounding game like he had against Georgetown, but then ask him to be the one to switch off, and then maybe ask a Phil Booth, to front Theo John and have help over the top. Villanova's run that type of offense for a long time. They've had to, back to the 4-guard sets. But I think you're exactly right, is that if Demir Cosby Roundtree is playing any significant minutes, you're going to have to hedge and recover in that man-to-man set.
Well, even if he doesn't, if he's trying to switch, I think he's going to get in foul trouble and not be able to play the minutes anyway. So I expect him not, like you said, maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most if Villanova wants to stay in the game.
Yeah, tremendous point there. Absolutely. For Marquette, led by Markus Howard, 15 points per game. Sam Hauser, about 16. Joey Hauser, about 11. Sakara Neem, he's a really good player. He hasn't hit a ton of threes this year, but all 4 of those guys on the floor, as soon as Howard comes around that high ball screen, he can either dive to the 10, find somebody on the outside, or he can dribble his way around the perimeter to maybe the right wing on a high ball screen at the top of the key, draw that second defender, and the athleticism of Aneem can back cut to the hoop and finish that way on a dish from Markus Howard. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes on the whiteboard, but that's really the key for Marquette. And oh, by the way, when all that breaks down, there might be no better guy at the end of the shot clock than Markus Howard, a guy to take a shot from an off-balance position with 2 or 3 guys on him and finish over the top. He's so good. There are a lot of guys in the league that can do it. Phil Booth, Shamori Pons, but Howard, to this point in the season, has been the best. Going to be a real struggle for the Villanova Wildcats. Kev, before we take a break, any thoughts that you had, anything we didn't hit here in the first 30-plus minutes?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that this is going to be a key week for them. I mean, Creighton's a tough team. They're coming in at home. That needs to be a must-win for them. And then they're really going to be tested going to the best team in the conference on the road.
This is the Villanova Basketball Report. Bob Long, Kevin McClernand, and we are now going to take a break. We'll come back very shortly, so hang with us. We're going to do our V's and O's segment, talk a little bit more about Villanova and how they need to defend Marquette. We'll put it on the whiteboard, break that all down for you, maybe tell you a little bit more about Jermaine Samuels as well. Hang with us, and we'll be back here on BLS.
Ford is Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfurt Avenue.
Generation after generation. Our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfurt Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dunphyford.com.
Come experience the Dunphy difference. You'll be glad you did.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of. what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
I would say that LaSalle is dynamic. Prepared. Active. Diverse. Brotherhood. Family.
Welcome back inside the Villanova Basketball Report. Bob Long here for the V's and O's, where we take you to the whiteboard and we discuss something either upcoming in Villanova basketball or something that we think is going to be really important to keep in mind as the season goes forward. I'll tell you what it is tonight. It's the big matchup against Marquette. Number 14 against number 10 as the Cats go to 5-serve form in what should be their toughest matchup in Big East play of the year. What's so tough about the Marquette Golden Eagles? Real simple. His name is Markus Howard, and he's averaging 25 points per game. He can score from absolutely anywhere, and he runs the show. Think Phil Booth for Villanova. Same type of guy, a little bit more efficient, probably can hit a little bit more of a difficult shot on any given moment, and he has been doing this for so long as their guy for the last 2-3 years. He's an absolute stud. They run a ton of high ball screens, and it's something that we've talked about over the course of the last few years with Villanova. They've struggled defensively, and the reason is because of the big guys that Villanova's had. 3 years ago, I guess, it was Daniel Ochefu, right? Last year, it was Omari Spellman, and now it's Demir Cosby-Roundtree. These two guys right here aren't fleet enough of foot, aren't quick enough to guard somebody on the outside, so that has always prevented the true switch. And when they have switched, Kevin made this point in the last segment, they are very prone to get into foul trouble. Omari, he was athletic enough at times to do it. You see him now in the NBA and being a guy that can play that multiple position, can pop out and shoot the three. So he can play at the perimeter side on offense. On defense, his issue was communication and switching. And so he had similar struggles. So as great as Villanova has been, winning national championships, the bugaboo has always been the high ball screen. And I think it's going to continue on Saturday. So Howard, let's run some play designs here. Markus Howard has the basketball here for Marquette. And Theo John is the big for Marquette. At 6'9", he's going to come up here and deliver a screen. So now John up here delivering a screen. For Villanova, it's Phil Booth. Booth is covering right here. Now Howard's going to come off this screen. Here comes Demir Cosby-Roundtree for the Wildcats, ready to pick him up. This is called a hedge and recover. When Demir Cosby-Roundtree tries to force Howard this way rather than allowing him to turn a corner and go to the hoop. So that's Roundtree's job, is to push him out this way as Phil Booth fights around this screen and is able to recover on Howard. But the problem with all this is that now Theo John, let's clean this up a little bit, right? So we started with Howard here, Booth here, John down here, and Cosby-Roundtree. Now John's up here giving this screen. Roundtree is up here, and Howard's over this way with Booth recovering. So now John is here all alone as Booth is coming over here and Roundtree is over here as well. So now Roundtree either has to recover in here or you need help from a Joe Cremo or a Sadiq Bey to prevent any cut to the hole. The good thing about Marquette is that John doesn't have the ability to shoot the three-point shot. So you're not going to pick and then pop. You're going to pick and then slip, and you need one of these guys to be able to recover as it's Demir Cosby-Roundtree getting back into the play. That's what happens when Demir Cosby-Roundtree's on the floor. The issue, though, is that Howard is so good he can launch a shot out of nowhere. John's pretty athletic. He can get to the hole. And then if Saddiq Bey crashes from over here, well, now all of a sudden you have Aneem. If somebody crashes from this side, you have Hauser. And Marquette can space the floor so well, these guys can fire it over the top and hit the three. They can beat you in so many ways. It's a great, great offense that's beaten very good defenses, and Villanova's defense, who hasn't been as successful against the pick and roll, may struggle. Let's replace Demir Cosby-Roundtree. He's over here on the bench, and on in his place comes Jermaine Samuels, right? Samuels has a different type of aspect that he brings to the game. Samuels is down here for Villanova. He's guarding John. Let's run the same set. Howard up here at the top, guarded by Phil Booth. Here comes John to set the screen. Jermaine Samuels, instead of, as Howard comes around here, instead of hedging and recovering, just comes right here. And it's going to be an immediate switch. Booth. So now Howard, after that screen, is right here. Jermaine Samuels is also right here on the wing. Now Booth is guarding John, and John's going to slip to the hole. Booth is likely going to front him, because if Booth is back here, all of a sudden John, a couple power dribbles, gets into position, and a little curl to the hoop. So Booth has to now front John and say to Howard, you want to throw it over the top? That's the only way you're going to get it to John. That's where Saddiq Bey over here can come in and intercept the pass, anything that has a little bit too much air. This is actually a defensive set that I think can work a little bit better, and why Villanova has gone with smaller lineups at times this year because of Cosby-Roundtree's struggles defensively. The issue, though, we're going to take everybody off the floor and just evaluate what we just created. So after Samuel switches from John to Howard and Booth from Howard to John, now what you have is Markus Howard out here on the wing against Jermaine Samuels. Isolate that matchup. Who do you like? I like Markus Howard. And so that's going to be a struggle for Villanova. I think they need to change up, throw different looks at him. Perhaps there's a zone look that you throw out there as well. Something like Booth, Collin Gillespie. Let's throw Samuels out here because I like his ability and his length. Saddiq Bey is also very good this way. And who would that put in the middle? Let's just say Demir Cosby-Roundtree. Honestly, I don't see this lineup really happening too often. You know what? You know who I didn't put is Pascal. So let's go with Pascal right in the middle. Samuels now, if Howard's up here and they still try to run, because you can absolutely run high ball screen out of against a zone defense. So John plants himself right here, and as Booth comes into guard, Howard's going to come this way, forces Samuels to come up, but only for a hedge, as then Booth comes right back into the play, and Samuels scoots to the corner. But again, they spaced it so well with Aneem out here and Hauser out here that any type of movement this way and Villanova having to communicate between the upper prong and then the baseline exterior defender is going to create potential problems on the wing and in the corner. So Marquette is going to be a struggle for Villanova to play against from a defensive perspective. They challenge you in so many ways. The answer is that you need to contain Marquette and throw a ton of different looks at them over the course of the game. Some of that's going to be man-to-man with Demir Cosby-Roundtree hedging and recovering. Some of that's going to be pure switching. Jermaine Samuels, Saddiq Bey, guys that can be better in that situation if they are forced to guard Markus Howard for 5 to 7 seconds. And then zone. I wouldn't be surprised to see Villanova go with some zone as well. The more they change up those looks coming out of timeouts, I think the more successful they can be defensively against Marquette. So that's our V's and O's segment here tonight. We'll take you back to the studio. Bob Long, Kevin McClernand. We're going to talk more about Villanova heading into this big week. We'll have our picks, and we'll have a little bit of trivia as well before we get out of here. Thanks for being with us, and we'll be right back.
Ford is Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfurt Avenue.
Generation after generation, our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfurt Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dumpyford.com.
Come experience the Dumpy difference. You'll be glad you did.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
I would say that LaSalle is dynamic. Prepared. Active. Diverse. Brotherhood. Family.
Welcome back inside the Villanova Basketball Report. Bob Long. Kevin McClernand is down in Baltimore, Maryland. Start with you, Kevin. What'd you think of the V's and O's? Any thoughts on what you heard there, and any thoughts on how Villanova is going to be able to go and attack Marquette?
Yeah, no, I thought you explained it great, how they're going to have to do that and defend those pick and rolls. And, I mean, it's going to be tough, like you said. And you put some interesting matchups on there and lineups for Villanova that we'll see if they're able to handle that Marquette pick and roll. Yeah,
I like what you said about Saddiq Bey as well. I kind of threw Samuels in that rotation in terms of the guy that we'll sometimes have to pick up, only because I see him guarding a guy like John perhaps a little bit more. But again, we saw Saddiq Bey have to go up against Martine Crumple for Creighton in the past. I think actually Wednesday will give us a good sense who they're going to put up against Crumple in matchups like that, because there are absolutely similarities between the way Creighton plays and the way Marquette plays. So I do think it'll be a little bit telling and a good game to watch for Villanova fans. Well, because Creighton's a great team anyways, but a little bit of a look-see into what Marquette might bring. But also want to now introduce Kevin Long, who is on with us on the phone. Couldn't be with us here, but excited to have him. And Kevin, welcome to the show. How are you doing here today?
Not being able to make it to the studio tonight. I'm excited to provide a little bit of insight from afar here, calling in. Love being a part of the show, so had to have my voice heard here.
There you go. Good stuff. Well, wanted to get your thoughts on, I guess, anything that occurred in the week that was. What struck your fancy?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that really struck my fancy, as you say, is the way that Collin Gillespie stepped up in Sunday's game against Georgetown when Phil Booth really was not himself. We've talked before in the V's and O's segment about how Phil Booth playing on the ball has been better for Villanova. They've been able to create shots earlier and create better shots for themselves because really, Phil's the guy handling the ball and taking a lot of the shots, and he's just creating more offense. He's not as timid as Collin Gillespie, but it seems like Gillespie is starting to emerge in this new role, playing mostly two guard, but also starting to see some more time on the ball. And we've talked about it before, how Phil Booth is going to win and lose some games for you. He is a heck of a player, but, there are going to be times where he goes cold. And Collin Gillespie really stepped up in that game on Sunday, so really encouraging to see that from him. The other player I wanted to talk about this week was Sadiq Bey. So he really stepped up in the DePaul game, really had a nice game. Did not see as much from him in the Georgetown game, but I'm excited to see him continue to develop and have games like that. I just think you're going to see that from this team every game. There's going to be one role player that shows you a little bit that you weren't necessarily expecting, and that's what this team is really going to need moving forward in order to keep keep their winning ways. Jermaine Samuels, I'm sure you touched on the V's and O's. He's been playing some good defense. He's grabbing some boards, which has been great for this team. Just not sure where the offense has gone in the past couple of weeks, so I'm curious to see why and where this has gone for him since that great Temple effort that he had back in December.
Yeah, we surmised that there could be a full red light or could be some sort of injury because it just doesn't look normal. The one thing he's not doing is catching to shoot, and that's something that Jay talks about with his guys all the time. Catching to shoot them up, sleep in the streets. That's been the mantra of the team. Frankly, that was the mantra of Jermaine Samuels. I mean, there were times he was taking ill-advised shots I didn't want him to take, but he was taking them nonetheless. Now he's not even looking at the rim when he catches the ball. But I don't know if you had any last thoughts before we get to the final proceedings of the evening, Kev.
Yeah, so I guess I would relate this to the way Eric Paschal looked back in his redshirt sophomore season with the Wildcats. He tended to catch the ball and wanted to go up and shoot for a while, and he was not the three-point shooter that he is today. You could tell that Jay Wright was telling him, go to the basket, that's your strength. Now, I think Eric is clearly a much better driver than Jermaine Samuels. Jermaine is not necessarily looking to drive the ball at this time, so a little bit of a different scenario, but I could see this being a situation where Jay is saying, okay, Jermaine, I need you to figure out these parts of your game. You have the shot. I need you to be able to facilitate the ball. I need you to play defense. I need you to grab some rebounds. Eventually, you're going to be one of our go-to guys, but I just don't need you in that role right now for this season. So, maybe it's an injury. Maybe you're right. Or maybe this is just Jay Wright giving him a little bit of a different directive right now.
All right, let's now go to Kevin McClernand, who is going to give us thoughts on, I guess he's going to give us games or he's going to give us trivia. So I'll let you start in whatever order you'd like.
Well, we'll stick with trivia for now because they're both on the games this week, and we'll start with Creighton. When is the last time that Creighton made the Final Four?
When is the last time that Creighton made the Final Four? Wow. I have no idea. When Kyle Korver was playing, I'm going to say like the 90s? 90s? Oh, God. I don't know. No idea, actually, because I don't think they did it back then. The 80s sometime. The 70s. Well, I have no idea. Kev, do you have a thought? Kevin Long?
I'll throw in a guess. I'll say 1982.
Well, it was a trick question because they've never made the Final Four.
Okay.
So.
See, I think I was going to get there eventually when I went 80s. No, not the 70s. No, 60s. Yeah. Okay. Trick question. He didn't go to college, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The old school Chris Perangeli and Kevin McClernand, Philly's finest commercial there. Great times for the old school Bob Long sports fans there.
And then we'll go to Marquette. Now, this isn't a trick question. They have made the Final Four. And when was the last time Marquette made the Final Four?
When was the last time Marquette made the Final Four was the question, Kevin Long.
2003.
2003 is, I would guess, is correct.
Wade. The only time they made, and that's correct. Tom Crean, the coach back then.
Yes, Tom Crean, and they lost to Syracuse. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure.
It would have been Syracuse or Kansas, but I think they lost to Syracuse.
And then the final trivia is, who's Marquette's all-time leading scorer?
Who is Marquette's all-time leading scorer?
Dwayne Wade is number 29 on the list, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, he left early.
This is junior year, though.
Yep. Who is Marquette's all-time leading scorer? Would that be, I guess I'll ask for a hint. Is it in any way recent?
Yeah, recent. Not like within the last couple of years. Lazar Hayward is second on the list. He did not pass this guy, if that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
How'd you know? How'd you know that's who I was going for?
I assumed.
Lazar. All right, well, I'm just going to say I'm wrong because that was going to be my guess. Kevin Long?
Not within the past couple of years.
Oh, wait a second. Yeah, I might have somebody, but go ahead.
I think I'm going to go with Jimmy Butler.
No, that's incorrect. Jimmy transferred there too, I believe. So I don't think he played all 4 years at Marquette.
Yeah. What about, what was that guy's name? Not McCants. No, not McCants, but it was the guy, number 22. He played on the team with Wesley Matthews and Dominique
James.
Dominic James, excuse me. Oh, my goodness.
Yep, you got him.
I got him?
Yeah, that's the guy, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I mean, no, don't do this. It's bad radio, bad TV. Tell me the answer. I hate myself.
Jarrell McNeil.
Jarrell McNeil.
Yep. Yeah, Hayward just came up short of him a couple years ago. So.
Okay.
And that's all for trivia. So let's move on to the pick'em games.
All right.
We have 2 Tuesday games, which they are the non-Kevin McClernand lines, we'll call them. They're the real lines. St. John's is 6.5-point dogs at Marquette.
All right, St. John's, 6.5-point dogs at Marquette. I like the Marquette Golden Eagles in that one. I think they are a very good basketball team. Obviously, St. John's a little bit on the fritz, although if there is a team that could come in and win that game, it would be the Johnnies. But that line tells me Fiserv Forum is a big factor. Johnny's not as good on the road. I like Marquette.
Is it to me?
It is to you now, Kev. Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if Kevin was talking there. I'll take the Johnnies. I think they're a scrappy bunch. I think they're really going to come to play. Shamori Pons is obviously going to keep them in any game that they're in. 6.5 points to Marquette. Obviously a very good team, but give me the Johnnies to cover.
All right, Johnny's to cover.
And I'm going to agree. We talked about St. John's needs a big-time win, and I think not that Marquette's going to look towards the Villanova game, but maybe they might have something else on their mind that St. John's will be able to cover that, if not get their big-time win. The second Tuesday game is Kansas State hosts Kansas, and they are 1-point favorites.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kansas State hosts Kansas and is a 1-point favorite.
Wow.
Vegas would tell me to take Kansas State, but I just can't do it. Obviously, there's some turmoil with Kansas in terms of Azubuike being out, D'Souza being ineligible. I still think I am still going to go with Kansas to win that basketball game and cover the spread. Cover the spread. Having some trouble with the phone here, so I apologize for Kevin Long's sake. I'm hoping that this improves here slightly. Don't know why that is. Let's try this again. Kevin, you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Bob?
All right, my bad on that. But, so I picked Kansas +1.
Yeah, I heard everything. I agree with you. I'm going to pick Kansas as well. I think they'll win this one outright. Something tells me that the ruling of D'Souza ineligible, regardless of whether or not he's played this year, is going to inspire this Kansas team. Obviously, they're hurting without Azubuike as well for the year. I don't really see Kansas State as a team that's should be favored against Kansas, and I think they're going to be playing some inspired basketball. So give me the Jayhawks.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I was a little confused that Kansas State was favored in the game, so I'm rolling with Kansas. Also, yeah, I want to disagree, but I just can't on that. Then we have 2 Saturday games. Florida State hosts Louisville, and these are my numbers now. So I'm saying the Seminoles are 3.5-point favorites.
I like Louisville outright. So the Seminoles 3.5-point favorites. I think Louisville will not only cover that line, but Chris Mack will go into Tallahassee and win that basketball game.
Bob, I have to agree with you on that one. This Louisville team has been up and down, but I like them over Florida State in this one as well to cover and win outright.
All right, I get to argue then. I'm taking the Seminoles. I think the home advantage, and I think Louisville's playing right now against Virginia Tech. I'm not sure what the score is, but it's 2 tough games. I mean, all ACC, especially this time of year, all of them are tough games, but I think Florida State's going to win that game.
Kevin, am I wrong to just not really trust that Florida State team yet? Am I crazy? That's kind of where I'm coming from. I
never trust any Florida State teams.
Yeah, I still don't trust them to score consistently enough. I think they can defend at a high level, and I think when they do score, they can do very well. A trip to the Final Four last year, wasn't it? No, Elite Eight. I'm sorry, to the Elite Eight, and they lost to Michigan. But I just don't. I don't trust them. So
did they lose to Michigan or did they lose to Loyola? I thought. Or no, maybe
Kansas State, I believe, is the one.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, too many 9 seeds that went that far that I'm getting confused.
That's right.
And then our final game is you got to go Duke at Virginia. I'm going to give Virginia 2.5-point favorites. Or no, actually 1.5. We'll say 1.5.
Boy, that's a great game. Duke at Virginia. First game, Duke won by 2 points. Kevin's going Virginia -1.5. For the line. I still think Duke's going to win the game, so I go Duke. I just think they're a little bit better than this Virginia team, and I think they're going to win the basketball game outright, even though it is on the road at Virginia.
Yeah, I'd be hard-pressed to pick against Duke in any game, let alone giving them points. Virginia is obviously a very talented defensive team. I'm not sure if they have the offense to keep up with Duke. So, given the points, I think Duke will win this game outright, actually.
I'm conflicted because, a lot of these freshmen going to Virginia, hostile environment. Trey Jones, still not 100% sure if he's 100%. But I'm going to go UVA. You guys both go on Duke, I'll go against it.
Okay, he goes UVA. The really popular thing to say, the I'm a smart guy thing to say by the pundits, is that Virginia's offense isn't your grandfather's Virginia offense. And forget UMBC, this is a team that can really score this year. And by the way, I'm not forgetting UMBC. This is a team that struggled to score over the last few years, but their defense is so dominant. Listen, they have some solid players. Certainly Kyle Guy has the chance to light it up. But there are also still times where this offense struggles to have off-ball movement, they struggle to get high-low action, and they struggle to score consistently. They'll go 4 minutes in between timeouts without scoring. It was like 7-0. They led Clemson with like 10 minutes left in the first half. Don't tell me this isn't your grandfather's Virginia team. Perhaps at times they are more efficient, and I bet they are overall. but they can hit a snag when they play really athletic teams that's willing to guard them at the perimeter and is able to stay with Ty Jerome off the dribble. You know, if you can guard DeAndre Hunter, you've taken away most of the athletic matchup. Jack Salt is just okay and is a, you know, situational big. Kyle Guy is a guy that can fire it up from anywhere and can hit. But if he goes cold, Ty Jerome is not winning a game for you on his own. DeAndre Hunter is a very talented player, but I haven't seen him be the guy to score 20, 25 points a game, obviously. I am not convinced that this isn't your grandfather's Virginia team yet. Then again, I'd probably pick him to go to the Final Four if I could right now. So talking out of both sides of my mouth. But I just laugh because there are so many so-called experts out there that feel the need, I think at times, to say something unique and non-generic. So what they say is what's become very generic. Every pundit saying that this isn't your grandfather's UVA team. It's a little bit of a rant, but it's what I got.
Yep, and next week in ours, it won't be your grandfather's show because I'll actually have the standings for our season in these picks. So
awesome.
Look forward to that.
You the man. I appreciate it. Kevin Long, thanks for spending a couple minutes on the phone with us.
Absolutely, Bob. I appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. Kevin McClernand, thanks for being with us as always. Great job.
Yeah, it was a great show. Looking forward to seeing this team in action this week.
Yeah, it's a big week for these Villanova Wildcats. Wednesday at home against Creighton, and then on the road Saturday at Marquette. As big a week as they've had all year. So excited to watch it with all you and then react next week. So for our good friends Kevin Long, Kevin McClernand, I am Bob Long from the set here in Bluebell saying so long, and we'll be back next week to talk more Villanova basketball here on the Villanova Basketball Report. Good night, everybody.